Well, welcome to Your City on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on with the city of Billings. This month we're very excited to have Shane Shelden with us. Shane is a lieutenant with the Billings Police Department. Shane, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we're going to talk all about the police department and the detective division and all that kind of good stuff. But before we do that, a little background, a little history. Did you grow up in the area? Did you come to the area? Give us some history.
So I was originally born in England, moved to the United States with my mom back in the late 80s, and moved around Montana quite a bit, northern Wyoming, and settled in the Billings area probably early to mid 90s, and graduated from Huntley Project and been here in Billings ever since.
All right, very good. And did you kind of know coming out of high school that you wanted to go into law enforcement, or how did that pique your interest? How did you decide, hey, law enforcement's something that I want to do?
I had some interest in it when I was in high school. I went a different route to begin with, ended up working some different jobs, and while working up at the airport, one of my good friends was a police officer at the airport, and I ended up getting laid off with United Airlines when they went through their bankruptcy. All the airlines went through their bankruptcy stuff back in 2002, 2003.
Sure.
So we were just kind of chatting about what I was going to do next, and got to talk to him about it, and decided I was going to give being a law enforcement officer a shot. So hired on with the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office in May of 2003.
Okay. And then did you ever work as a police officer up at the airport, or just move from Bighorn County into the city of Billings?
So actually I did. So I worked from May of 2003 to I believe July of 2005 with the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office. And then I took a job with Billings Airport Police from July of 2005 till September of 2006.
Sure.
And then September of 2006, I got hired on with the Billings Police Department. I've been there ever since.
Right on. Talk to us a little bit about your role in law enforcement. First, Bighorn County Sheriff, and then your role up at the airport as a police department, and that'll roll into then kind of what you're doing now with the police department. But how were those, I guess, ever so slightly different jobs than the one that you have right now?
I would say working at the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office and working with the Billings Police Department was very similar. I was a patrol deputy down there responding to calls, just out looking for suspicious or things out of place.
Sure.
Same thing when I worked as on patrol with the police department. Up at the airport, it's more airport security. You are looking for those things that are out of place, but kind of a different set of rules up there, or more, same set of rules, but there's more FAA rules that you're, looking into and enforcing up there.
Yeah.
As far as like security at the airport, making sure unauthorized personnel aren't out on the runway, for example, or out by the airplanes before they take off, or when they're boarding passengers and such.
All right. Well, I'm sure that what most of us know about what it's like to be in the police department, we've learned on TV, and I'm sure that's exactly what it is to be a police officer. But no, in all seriousness, tell us kind of what is the difference. We see dramas play out on TV that involves a police officer and law enforcement, but what is the job really day to day, and how are those things different than what you see on TV?
Obviously we're not solving major crimes in 45 minutes with commercials,
Yeah.
So, in all reality, a lot of times you see on TV everybody's working on the same thing, or everybody's just working on one thing, where in all actuality in real life there's so many different things going on. At the Billings Police Department last year, overall we took, I believe off the top of my head, it was between 96 and 97,000 calls for service. What that leads to is, yes, we work as a team, and we work as a team with different departments, but there's a lot of things going on, and unfortunately we aren't able to start on one investigation and then follow that all the way through to the end and then work on the next thing. A lot of times you're prioritizing calls, whether it be dispatch, looking at what we're going to send officers to next, whether they have, a vehicle crash with injury versus a shoplifting, or, maybe a robbery. They'll prioritize those calls to make sure that officers are getting to the more serious events first. And there's just a lot of different things that are going on.
Sure. Yep. And then talk to us a little bit about the detective division. Where do you guys fit in with the police department, and kind of what is the role of the detective division?
So the role of the detective division is to spend time investigating more serious incidents that take a lot of time to do the follow-up on. Interviewing multiple individuals, whether they be suspects, victims, witnesses, doing canvasses on areas for crimes that have happened, preserving evidence. Not every single officer in the department is trained to the extent that a lot of the detectives are for evidence preservation, whether you're talking DNA or like tool marks, anything like that. There's a lot of specialized training that goes into it for the more extensive or more serious cases like homicides, sexual intercourse without consent, or more commonly known as rape, and felony assaults, things like that.
Sure. Talk to us maybe like, you've touched on pieces of this, but what does a day look like, as a police detective, or maybe what does a week look like? Kind of what are those steps that you're taking through the course of a day or through the course of a week?
So generally speaking, detectives are going to be assigned cases. Currently, the position that I'm in right now is a detective sergeant position. I basically go through and hand out cases to detectives. So patrol will go out, they'll take a case more often than not. They'll take the initial report on an incident that occurs. Very serious incident, they will take initial statements, and then that case will get, or that investigation will get sent up to the detectives division. That case will then get assigned to a detective, and then depending on what needs to be done right away, how much needs to be done, how many people need to be interviewed, will depend on how many detectives are immediately involved in that. One detective is assigned, but it could be a case where we've got a lot of things to do, where we'll grab 4 or 5 detectives to go out and get all that stuff handled based on how time sensitive it is. Whether we're out looking for security surveillance for a robbery, for example. A lot of businesses, their security surveillance will, usually it's on a loop, right? So whether it's on a week-long loop or a month-long loop, sometimes we have to get out there right away and get, to be able to preserve evidence that will help identify a suspect and prove that that's who it was that committed this crime.
Sure.
Witness statements, things like that. So on a day-to-day basis, detectives will be prioritizing their cases. Like I said earlier, we're not just assigned one case. Detectives have anywhere from 5, 6, 7 to 12, 13, 14 cases that are active at a time. It's not ideal, but with the number of detectives that we have 13 general detectives upstairs, and that's just, we have a lot of cases coming in, and they'll prioritize those cases and work on them.
How long does the average case take a detective? Sometimes they've got 7, 8, sometimes they're 12, 13. Is that based on, okay, I'm assigning those, but I know generally this one probably isn't going to take that long, so I'm going to give a couple more of the not so long ones, and I know looking at this one, they're going to be doing this one for a while. So how long is maybe a short case, and how long is maybe a long case?
Well, we have some cases that'll last up to a year, sometimes longer. A lot of times cases can be turned around, I shouldn't say a lot, but sometimes cases can be turned down pretty quickly. It just depends on the number of witnesses, the amount of evidence. Another thing is getting some of that evidence sent up to the crime lab. So if we've got to send up toxicology or blood results or like what's called a sexual assault nurses examination. We call it a SANE kit. That's what is conducted at the hospital on a victim of a sexual offense. It just depends on how much time it takes for that to get back before they can proceed with like a suspect interview or something like that. But yes, as far as assigning more than one case to a detective at a time, we keep a record of what detectives have which cases, and then working with those detectives on a day-to-day basis, I have a pretty good idea of where they are, or the other lieutenant or the other sergeant. We have an idea as to where they are with their cases, so we know when if they have a sex offense, hey, I've got the witnesses taken care of, I've got video surveillance and everything. I'm really just kind of holding out on this case right now, waiting for, evidence to be taken care of and, get the information back from the crime lab, so I know that I can assign that detective a new case at this time.
Yeah.
So.
I know the state of Montana, I think, opened a second crime lab here in Billings. Has that been helpful to you guys to have it here and close and somewhere where you could, access it maybe?
It is extremely helpful.
Yeah.
It has sped up the process for a lot of the drug cases. To my knowledge, and I apologize if I speak out of turn here, but to my knowledge, it is just drug offenses that,
okay.
Identifying drugs
Sure.
that officers have taken off of individuals during, encounters. The state crime lab up in Missoula is still taking all of the blood evidence, DNA evidence, guns, things like that.
Sure.
For comparative data, things like that.
What are some of the most common calls or cases that you guys are going to be involved with? I know you've touched on a few of them, but what are the most common ones that you're going to be the detectives are going to be involved with?
So we're going to be involved with major violent crime. A lot of times we get called out after hours. Generally, detectives division covers from about 6:30 in the morning with their day shift detectives. Noon shift comes in about 11 a.m. And works till about 9 p.m. So after that, it's kind of an on-call basis. So generally speaking, we're going to be dealing with major violent crimes such as homicide, robbery, felony assaults, whether it's assault with a weapon. We're going to be dealing with sex offenses and a lot of financial crimes. It's just, we deal with a lot of the cases that a patrol officer either doesn't necessarily have the time to do all of the follow-up while still taking calls in their area, or maybe the training to take care of some of those things. They just haven't been exposed to all of that type of stuff quite yet. So
maybe what are some of the least common calls or cases that you guys deal with? Something that you're not dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, thankfully, we're not dealing with homicides on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Although, the last couple of years, we've had a serious uptick in major violent crime like that.
Yeah.
But so far, we're kind of, we're trying to keep our head above water with those types of things, because the follow-up and the investigation, it takes so long and it's so detail-oriented. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything else that we don't deal with a whole lot. I mean, misdemeanors don't come upstairs for the most part. So a misdemeanor assault, misdemeanor shoplifting, things like that. But
are there times? Are there times? I know you guys kind of are on for a certain amount of time during the day. But probably, not 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, but those patrol officers are out there. Are there times when that patrol officer is out there and they're on a call and they just know, hey, I need to get a detective out here ASAP? This literally cannot wait another 2 hours. It really can't. And there's guys on call for that, and they're being called out for stuff like that. Talk to us about some situations like that.
So any type of suspicious death. So what we have is a 5-person rotation for a detective supervisor that's on call. So what we do is we take a week-long on call, and then if a patrol officer comes across something that they think is, not quite right, they have suspicions as to it being more than what's really going on, and it being serious, what they'll do is they'll get a hold of the patrol sergeant that's always on duty, and the patrol sergeant will get a hold of whoever the detective supervisor is that's on call. They'll give them the details. For myself, the other day, there was a suspicious death. Gave details. I called out a couple of the detectives. We went out, we took a look at it, we started to preserve the crime scene, and ended up calling some more detectives out. And then we processed the crime scene. I received a call about a little before midnight. You know, we were out most of the night, you know, getting a search warrant for the residence and, you know, taking pictures to document everything and, you know, then going through conducting a search after the fact. So, yeah, if it's after hours, you know, the detectives division is still available. It's just on an on-call basis.
Sure. What have been some of the most challenging aspects that you guys have run across in the detective division, and maybe, I'm sure you're aware, within the patrol division as well, during the pandemic? What kind of precautions have you guys been having to take, and what kind of things have you guys run across during the pandemic that normal situation we don't have to deal with these type of things?
You know, one of the things I think was a little bit of a difficulty for us was just contacting people. Rightly so, people were very concerned about, you know, COVID-19 and
Sure.
and wanted to interact with others as little as possible. But we still have to go out and look for, you know, witnesses or try to talk to victims or, you know, make contact with suspects. I mean, not every time that we receive a report about something is that actually what happened, and we have to offer the opportunity to the suspect to give their side of the story as well. And so getting in contact with people, you know, before COVID-19, you know, we would really like to have the person come in and sit down with them and take a statement from them face to face, you know, as you and I are now. But what it kind of developed into was, you know, we had to make some changes and, for example, take statements over the phone. If you wanted a statement, it's just really how it had to happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was a lot of different things I think that changed. Nothing huge, but a lot of little things, you know.
Yeah.
Just going out to businesses, you know. A lot of the patrol guys, they were very good about, you know, wearing face coverings and when dealing with, dealing with the public.
How did the detectives deal with, you know, I'm sure that before when, and this was probably, it's probably true of suspects and witnesses as well, you know, they come in and they sit down and you have a conversation with them, and I know you guys get some training on, hey, this person has given me the straight story, or probably years of experience, I know this person's giving me the straight story versus, yeah, there's something fishy here. A lot of that is going to be body language, vocal tone, eye contact, those type of things that are going to get lost maybe in a video transmission. Have you guys been able to make up for that in some other way, or that's just an aspect of what you're doing that's been lost to the pandemic?
You know, I would say in a lot of situations, if it were a suspect of a crime, especially a major crime, we were creating an environment that we were able to talk to them in person.
Sure.
Talking with witnesses, you know, that's something you can do over the phone. You know, and a lot of times, some of that just comes off of comparing one person's story to the next. So when you start finding inconsistencies, then we do follow-up interviews and you know, just make sure that we're asking all the right questions, and when we find questions, we make sure we get answers for those, or do the best we can anyway.
Have there been aspects of this that you guys will, you know, kind of continue to use going forward? I know it's probably not ideal that you're not asking somebody something in person, but have there been, you know, things you go, you know, that wasn't as bad, and maybe that actually was a little more convenient, and I didn't have to go track this person down. I could just give them a phone call or FaceTime them or Zoom them, and it actually worked pretty good. Are there aspects of how you've been doing detective work during the pandemic that you think you'll see going forward, even when we're not in a pandemic?
I think it'll be case by case. I think in some situations, depending on the severity of the case, yes, we can continue to do phone interviews. I think in other cases or other instances, it would be better to do it in person. One of the things that we have changed that has become more available to us is training. Training over online venues. Whether it be recorded or like pre-recorded and just sitting down and watching something, or like essentially kind of a Zoom meeting where the trainer is in one place and officers are at their desk, or you know, just have a laptop or something that they can check into the training course with.
Sure.
I think that's something that will probably continue in the future because it gives us a little bit more access to a more, I guess, a wider variety of training.
Sure.
That necessarily we send, like if the police department sends me to another state for a week-long training, it's a little bit more expensive than being able to obtain some of those trainings, you know, over a Zoom meeting. Some stuff we're not going to be able to do that with because, you know, some training, it needs to be hands-on.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, again, it just case-by-case basis, I think that we've found some different ways to be able to save money and make the dollar go a little bit further.
Sure, absolutely. What kind of technology do you guys use in the detectives division? And I mean, I guess how have you seen that change over the number of years?
So in the detectives division, we're using quite a bit of technology. For one, we have what's called a Faro scanner. Faro scanners are used to document crime scenes or crash scenes. Instead of us having to go out and create like a baseline measurement system and go through and have several detectives measuring off each piece of evidence, and extremely time-consuming process, we decided to get what's called a Faro scanner, and it's used in the private world as well for not landscaping, but
land survey.
Yeah, surveying. Thank you. Used for surveying, all sorts of different applications. But as far as law enforcement goes, we'll set up a Faro scanner. We'll do a scan. We'll move it. We'll do another one based on how big the crime scene is, how many different rooms there are, if it's inside, if it's outside, how extensive, you know, maybe like a vehicle crash scene is.
Yeah.
But that's something that will provide us with measurements and a 3D version of the scene after the fact. We have what's called Cellbrite. That is a company that provides software and a computer program for us to be able to download information off of people's cell phones. So if we have a major violent crime, we can collect cell phones and potentially download information off of them. And you know, people talk on their cell phones all the time. Everywhere you go, you see somebody on their cell phone.
Sure.
So a lot of great evidence is found on cell phones, whether it's pictures and videos or text messages. We have what's called ZX. ZX is kind of tied into cell phones as well, more based on GPS information, kind of showing where somebody was with their cell phone at what time. So when, you know, a victim says, you know, hey, this is where I was, and the suspect came, and the suspect says that they weren't there, we get their cell phone, we can potentially download it and determine where they were at what time, and either prove or disprove what, you know, somebody is telling us. So
yeah, I would think that'd be a pretty quick way. Shane says I was here, I say I wasn't there, you say you weren't there, prove it, give me your cell phone. Okay, here you go. And you download it, and yeah, you weren't there, or yeah, you were.
Yep. So, and since I've been up in detectives, we've improved on those programs. Not saying that was me that was doing it, but those programs have been improved. We've obtained a new Faro scanner so that the scans take less time. You know, therefore we're not on scene as long.
Sure.
You know, we don't have roads shut down quite as long. Same thing with the Cellbrite. We've improved that with upgrading to like one of the higher packages. So it provides us more and better information and more usable information off of the cell phone.
Sure.
There's some other ones as well, but those are probably two of the main ones that we work with more often.
Okay. I promise you we'll get to a better side of this question, but what do you find to be the least rewarding aspect of working for law enforcement or the police detectives? What are some of the things that are just really not fun about the job?
I don't know if I would describe it as least rewarding, but some of the difficulties I would describe with law enforcement, especially being up in detectives, is you know, having to tell families something's horrible has happened to one of their loved ones. We say we're sorry, and of course I mean it when I say it, but it offers very little comfort to someone who's just lost a loved one.
Yeah.
You know, speaking with family about a loved one after the fact, you know, after an incident where, you know, they have they have died for whatever reason, whether it's a car crash, you know, a violent crime, you know, anything like that. Yeah. It's really difficult, and you know, you want to be as sensitive as you can, but there is information a lot of times that we need, and you know, we just take our time and, you know, let the family work through it, and sometimes we come back to it later, but yeah, you know, it's tough.
Yeah. So the other side of that coin, what is the most rewarding thing that you get to do as in the detectives department?
You know, just in general, solving crimes. You know, whether it's so a lot of what I do is child crimes. You know, children being victims of physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. You know, being exposed to things like domestic violence in the home, or, you know, drugs being used in the home, and they're, you know, it kind of falls under neglect, but more specifically, those two are some of the major things that we see. Knowing that after a conviction, for example, that you know that suspect isn't going to have the ability to perpetrate another crime on another child, or, you know, being there when, you know, detectives have solved a homicide, for example, and we've determined, like, hey, this is who it is, and we know now for sure. Mm-hmm. And you know, just kind of getting that process rolling to get the case over to the county attorney's office, you know, to get a warrant request out to get prosecution started.
Sure.
But, you know, then there's the little things, you know, there's whether it be just helping out a family get a few of their things back, that, you know, were, you know, maybe they were a victim of a burglary or something, and it happens to be a string, and it turns into a little bit bigger case, but that one family just being thankful that they were able to get their stuff back, whether, you know, it might be something insignificant to anybody else, but it's something important to them. Yeah. You know, some heirloom jewelry, or, you know, some family things that, you know, somebody's grandfather passed to their father, who passed it to them. Yeah. You know.
Gaze into your crystal ball a little bit. What do you see coming in the next 3 to 5 years? The detective division. What's out there on the horizon? What's going to help you guys do a better job of solving crimes in Billings?
You know, I'd like to see a few more people up there. But yeah, you know, I think that the investigations division does a great job. I think the police department as a whole does a great job. I think that we're on a good path. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of major changes over the next 3 to 5 years. But, you know, I think that, you know, the police department and the city in general are taking small steps to make things better, and you know, try and save a little bit of money for the taxpayers, and still put a very high quality product out there. All
right. Well, Lieutenant Shelden, thank you so much for taking the time to come down and visit with us today.
Absolutely.
And, you know, on behalf of the city, thank you and the detective divisions for all the hard work that you guys do. I know sometimes it can be a very thankless job, and one that is not easy to do. So thank you so much for all that you and the department does. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.